Literary icon Zora Neale Hurston was born Zora Lee Hurston on January 7, 1891, in the small town of Notasulga, Alabama. Her parents, John and Lucy Hurston, were former slaves who were determined to transcend the life of small town sharecroppers. In search of better opportunities, when Zora was a toddler, John moved the family to Eatonville, Florida, the oldest incorporated African American town in the United States. Things worked out as planned when, just a few years after relocating, John Hurston became the mayor of Eatonville.
Uncle Bud is not a work song. It's a sort of social song for amusement, and it's so widely distributed. It's growing all the time by incremental repetition, and it is known all over the South. No matter where you go, you can find verses of Uncle Bud. And it's their favorite song, and the men get to working in every kind of work, and they just yell down on Uncle Bud. And nobody particularly leads it. Everybody puts in his verse when he gets ready. And Uncle Bud grows and grows and grows.
What it is sung before the respectable ladies?
Never. It's one of those juke songs. And the woman that they sing Uncle Bud in front of is a juke woman. And
of course you heard it from women.
Yes, I heard it from women. Yes. Uncle Bud's a man like this. He can't get a woman, gonna use his fist. Uncle Bud, Uncle Bud, Uncle Bud, Uncle Bud, Uncle Bud.
The small Central Florida town became home for little Zora. Not only did she spend the majority of her childhood years there, but she often named it as her birthplace. As Hurston transforms Black Southern culture into art, capturing Southern draws in her writing, Eatonville became her canvas. The town became the setting of many of her stories, including the famed Their Eyes Were Watching God.
On board. For some they come in with the tide. For others they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget.
While Eatonville had her heart, Zora couldn't stay there. Following her mother's death in 1904, 13-year-old Zora was forced at the request of her father to leave home. This year began what Zora would refer to as her haunted years. True to her label of that time frame, not much is known other than the fact that she lived with several different relatives in several different cities and may have worked as a maid at some point as well. The haunted years came to an end in 1917 when Zora, at 26 years old, pretended to be 10 years younger so that she could complete high school in Baltimore, Maryland, where she was living with her sister. Her plan worked, and in 1918, she began her studies at Howard University and started writing her first short stories. For the remainder of her life, Zora would never reveal her actual birth date. With the haunted years behind her, Zora continued to write and focused on her education, earning an associate's degree from Howard University, then moving on to Barnard College, where she majored in anthropology. Around 1925, Zora's research project landed her in Harlem, where she was assigned to study Black culture. Still actively writing, Zora began to make friends with fellow writers, including Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, and many others. In 1928, she became the first Black graduate of Barnard College, then found herself in the middle of the Harlem Renaissance. But she didn't stop there. Zora had grown to love studying culture so much that she infused it into her writing. This is what led her to create the true to Southern roots stories that she is so well known for. Zora was revolutionary, but very much ahead of her time. In 1935, while studying at Columbia University, Zora, who was upset about how racism had framed African indigenous religions like hoodoo and voodoo as evil, decided to travel to New Orleans, Louisiana, and Haiti to study and write the true nature of the religion. While conducting her research, she studied the idea of zombies, rumored to exist in Haiti.
But when you got to the zombie, I noticed you kind of left her or him out of this book. That was in your other book,
Yes,
wasn't it?
well, I thought I'd said enough about the zombie. It had been talked about, and the book had come out in England, and it caused a sensation over there, too, and I'd been on We the People and talked about zombies, and I'd been out in Hollywood, and Arthur Hornblow hired me after reading my book, Tell My Horse, and I talked about zombies so much out there, and the Sec Rouge, and...
Well, I never heard you talk about them. Did you, Vincent?
No, I haven't.
Talk about the zombie just a wee little bit.
Well, a zombie is supposed to be the living dead. People who die and are resurrected, but without their souls. And they can take orders, and they're supposed to be never to be tired, and to do what the master says without cease and without being tired. Naturally, it would be futile for me to attempt to try to explain everything. I do know that people have been resurrected in Haiti. I do not believe that they were actually dead. I believe it was suspended animation. And since there's no embalming there, it's possible. And since people are not buried below ground, they have the above-ground vaults as they do in New Orleans. And they take corpses out. It's been proven, there have been cases proven where folks have been dead and folks thought they were done for, and months later somebody finds them somewhere in some hidden place, actually alive, but without their minds. And the process is that the Bokar, you know, they have two kinds of priests in Haiti. The Hungan, which is the regular voodoo priest, and then the Bokar, who is supposed to be a wicked priest. It is stated that a Hungan is not a Bokar, and a Bokar is not a Hungan. However, one and the same person sometimes acts the same, so that you have to take that with a sort of box of salt about one of them not being the same. But anyway, they know something. They go and awaken the person from the grave, and the Society des Morts, the Society of the Dead, goes with him, and they surround this tomb at midnight with their lights, and the Bokar goes inside, and with supposedly the soul of the dead man in his hand. Some Bokar say they carried it in a bottle. Others say they carried it in his hand, and they began to strike this dead body to wake him up, and at the same time holding his soul on his nose. And he must answer, because his soul is there. And so he answers, and when he begins to stir, they handcuff him so that he can't resist. And then they beat him, and finally wake him up thoroughly. And he's carried in the center of this Society of the Dead, and they must march him past his house where he lived, because if they don't, he will regain his consciousness someday. But if they carry him past the house where he lives, he will never remember again who he was or where he lived or anything. He will just be an animated person. And maybe he's taken to some distant plantation and put to work. And his relatives think that the person... But before that, he goes to the Humfort. That is the voodoo temple. And there he's given a drop or two of a colorless liquid, and in the course of a ceremony, and he will never remember again. Of course, they never give them salt. They claim that salt will tend to counteract that, and they will remember who they are. And this particular zombie, whom I photographed, whom I think I'm the first person on earth, and probably the last one to ever photograph a zombie, she had died in 1907, and nobody saw her anymore until 1936, when she was found naked on a road. But she remembered a little. She remembered where she used to live, and she went to this plantation that used to be her father's, which was now her brother's. She was identified by her brother, her ex-husband, her son, who was now grown. He was 2 or 3 years old when she died in 1907, and she was identified, and she was officially identified by the Haitian government, and that was all the records of her death and her burial, and I photographed her in 1936. Mm-hmm. And in Haiti. The picture was published first in Life magazine and is in this book here, Tell My Horse, the picture of the zombie.
See, I've never read Tell My Horse. That's why I didn't know it.
Yes. Zombies do exist, but whether I mean, the moot question is whether they can raise people from the dead. I think it is that they have brought drugs from Africa, which the so-called civilized world does not know about, but which they will find about, perhaps eventually, and which produce certain effects that
like
we don't know about.
Suspended animation.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. That could be.
Yes.
It seems, I've heard that theory advanced before, I
Yes.
suppose.
Certainly there are too many cases of proven zombies to claim they do not arouse people who've been allegedly dead.
Her research findings were published in Go Tell My Horse, which was released just 1 year after she published her most famous work to date, Their Eyes Were Watching God. The story of the true perspective of a Southern black woman is what made Their Eyes Were Watching God so revolutionary for that time period and to date.
Hey.
How about we have some lemonade?
How come you don't sleep with me no more?
I'll sleep with you. Go on, lay down. I'll sleep with you. See? Doc gonna be here. Everything gonna be okay.
There's no question that Zora Neale Hurston's writings were monumental, but there's also no question that America was not ready for much of what she had to say. She died financially struggling and alone in January of 1960. Her work would not be recognized until at least 15 years later, with one book in particular not being published until 2018.